Florida statutes. The purpose of the hearing is for the board to resolve all disputed issues which are at impasse between the college and the SEIU for the bargaining unit of part-time adjunct instructors. After a lengthy period of negotiations, the union declared impasse on November 17, 2021, notifying the Florida Public Employees Relations Commission and invoking the statutory impasse procedures set forth in Chapter 447 Florida Statutes. Pursuant to Florida statutes, the parties proceeded to a hearing before Special Magistrate Dennis Campagna, who issued a recommended order on the two issues at impasse. The President rejected the magistrate's recommendations, and the matter is now before the board for resolution of the impasse issues by board in its capacity as a legislative body for the college. This hearing is now required pursuant to Florida statutes to afford each party the opportunity to explain their position to the board with respect to the two issues at impasse. This proceeding is open to the public, but it is a labor proceeding with specific statutory requirements, and only the two parties, the college and the SEIU, will make formal presentations to the board. There will be an opportunity for public comment, but each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The college and the union will each be afforded 15 minutes to present their positions. In order to allow each party to fully make their presentation, board members are asked to hold any questions until the end of both presentations. The union will be called upon first, and the college will be called upon next. Upon the conclusion of both presentations, the board members will have an opportunity to ask questions, hear public comment, deliberate, and then vote on resolution of the impasse issues by taking such action as it deems to be in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved. Our first presentation will be by SEIU Representative Rick Smith. You may come to the podium and speak. We will have a timer that you can see as well.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Terry Lee. I'm adjunct faculty here at St. Petersburg College since 2016, and I'll be joining Rick Smith this morning in this presentation. So,
Sorry for
that's better. It's been about 2.5 years since we began work on our first contract. It's a long time, but first contracts tend to be that way, or at least that's what Rick tells me. Just a brief recap of our journey through this negotiation process. The Adjunct Faculty Union reached a tentative agreement with the SPC administration in November of 2020, and the board voted down that agreement. We went into further negotiations under vastly better economic conditions for the bulk of 2021. The union declared impasse after no movement on those negotiations. You're going to help me out here? Okay. Were you able to hear my earlier comments? Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
So we went before a special magistrate in March this year, 2022, and both parties presented evidence to support their positions. In May of this year, the special magistrate ruled in favor of the SPC adjunct union's position on the two outstanding issues, cancellation fees and a bonus for adjunct employees. And now here we are today. The board gets to have their say on these issues, and then you will ratify an agreement based on the magistrate's evaluation, the administration's recommendation, or you could come up with your own new solution. The good thing is that after today, you'll be ending the bargaining phase of this contract and ratifying the first adjunct union contract that will exist for a year. That means we'll be back in to negotiations in about 9 months or so.
Just a little personal thing, and I've been doing negotiations for over 40 years here. My experience in negotiations, particularly on first contracts, is they're all about establishing a relationship, kind of mutual trust and respect that's needed to get through this. The goal is to get to a point where we not only can agree to disagree, but also agree to move ahead on some common interests. Building relationships are hard, they're difficult, particularly in these past times. When we sat at the table, you had no idea who the adjuncts were across from you. They didn't know you either, not you personally, but the people at the table. But after a while, bargaining became more comfortable as we learned more and more about those sitting at the table across from us. But let's not forget, and this is something we considered, that these negotiations were conducted during perhaps the most chaotic and troubling times in the history of the college. You guys had other things on your mind. I understand that. We understood that. We were in the middle of the pandemic. We were in the middle of the worst economic downturn of our lives. And then suddenly we saw the largest flow of money to the college ever due to rescue legislation from the feds. And we were trying to establish a relationship that was only virtual. All bargaining was conducted online. The lack of face-to-face contact really doesn't help to establish the relationship. But I think we all did our best. We haven't reached an agreement on two issues, as you know, the proposed cancellation fee and the proposed bonus for adjuncts. You should be familiar with our reasoning on these, as we've had the same argument for many, many months, which you've heard at your executive sessions, and you've all had access to the transcript before the special magistrate, and no doubt read that. We're just going to hit the basics of these proposals and then move on how to our communications can actually be better next time. So Terry, you want to go into the cancellation fee?
Yes. Okay, Rick. So the first issue was the cancellation fee, and this may be one of those agree to disagree issues. The SPC adjunct position is that an employer should pay people when they work. And that's not a particularly controversial position to take. The college's position was that if an adjunct instructor puts time into preparing for a class, the college doesn't have to pay for that work performed. In his testimony given in front of the magistrate, the Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Leo Troth, made clear the college is asking adjuncts to put the minimal preparation work into their classes. It was also testified from the college that full-time faculty are paid for prepping their classes as part of their total pay package. Keep in mind, adjuncts teach just under half of all the classes that SPC students take. The adjunct faculty continue to believe that instructors who carefully prepare in advance to teach serve the students better and deserve to be compensated, at least nominally, for their services when their classes are canceled or given to a full-timer at the last minute. We hope you agree that a $150 cancellation fee is a nominal way to address this uncommon, it's not a very common event. However, if you don't agree, we'd like to suggest 3 steps that the college can agree to today that would go a long way towards dealing with this issue. The first one would be clearly communicate with adjuncts the classes where you feel there is no preparation needed. If there's no preparation, there's no work beforehand, and therefore no issue when the class is canceled or given to a full-timer as an overload class. Number 2, you could clearly communicate that if there is prep, the college won't pay for it if the class is canceled or given to a full-timer right before teaching begins. We need this kind of transparency. We're asking for transparency. The third one would be make a joint request to the U.S. Department of Labor to get an advisory opinion on whether prep work is counted as work time and or if it has to be paid. So those are 3 steps, and as we've said, you could agree to any of these steps today.
The biggest issue, I suppose, was the proposal for a bonus for adjuncts who taught during the pandemic before vaccines were available. Thus, our structuring of the bonus to only include the fall of 2020 and the spring of 2021. Adjuncts were looking for more than just a pat on the back for their excellent work for the college during this extraordinary time. They were seeking something tangible. Now, I got to tell you, admittedly, not asking for a wage increase was a controversial stance among St. Pete College adjuncts, as it had been more than 5 years since the last raise. If you add the 5 years without a raise and the last year of about 10% inflation in this area, adjunct pay fell behind the cost of living by about 19%. In other words, adjuncts are working for 19% less in real dollars than they were 6 years ago. It's clear that the compensation for adjuncts has been severely devalued. But on the other hand, there was and still are real problems with enrollment. The SPC adjuncts decided to ask for a one-time bonus to safely navigate an economic path that would not harm the students or services, and to establish a relationship which showed that the SPC adjuncts were realistic about future prospects for the college and willing to ease into a contractual relationship that would save millions of dollars. What do I mean by save millions? In 2021, all full-time and part-time college faculty and staff received a 3% wage increase. On average, a full-time instructor's salary increased by $1,860 a year, not including the additional $1,000 they received for COVID training. The raise impacted 900 or so workers at the college. Adjuncts weren't included in the raise or the COVID training. That 3% that you gave full-time faculty is cumulative, as Mark points out at negotiations all the time. Raises are cumulative. You keep paying for that over and over and over again. So it's well into the millions of dollars, that 3%. Our proposal for a one-time bonus wasn't even nearly in that league. It had a total price tag of under $700,000. By the way, these kinds of bonuses are standard fare in negotiations, a way to concretely show employees that you believe they're doing a good job without the cumulative costs associated with the raise. There was a failure of communication that came about. In the hearing before the special magistrate, the college argued that the adjunct's proposal was not accepted because it wouldn't be fair to full-time instructors. Even though our proposal was many millions of dollars less than what had been granted to full-time instructors and staff. To call our proposal for a COVID bonus economically unfair to full-time faculty was absolutely a new concept for us. We did not hear about this until the magistrate's hearing. If the college had brought this up during negotiations, as you would expect them to, we certainly could have come to an agreement of how to structure a bonus that was more in line with the college's concern for equity. But we didn't know. So it is all about communications. And the college did not provide adjuncts with the reasoning that they gave to the special magistrate. That's a red flag. We can't figure out why the administration's bargaining team never presented the Board of Trustees reasoning or logic behind their bargaining stance to your adjuncts. And the administration's concern is about equity.
So, working in academia and bargaining in that context should be a matter of facts, not opinions. That's what we as professors do. So this can really transform the nature of collective bargaining, but only if there's transparency and a desire to work in a collegial and collaborative way. So only if both parties know the facts and the reasoning behind the other party's position. So we can look at some best practices to see how others have worked together and initiate them the next time. These would include start with sharing of interests and issues. For example, we're both concerned with enrollment figures, adjuncts, trustees, and the administration all have a common interest in this. Can we do more to recruit students? What are the needs and resources available to recruit? How can we retain those we do recruit, and what are the resources needed to accomplish that? Can adjunct professors in the union assist the college in the recruitment and retention of programs? SPC adjuncts believe there's a lot we can do to accomplish these important goals and all other shared interests. Is there a reason to not organize bargaining around these questions? Second, share facts relevant to negotiations jointly so adjuncts and administration are working from the same page. We can't solve problems without a common understanding. Public data provided to us by SPC and the Department of Education have provided the facts needed for our negotiations. So that both parties operate with total transparency, nothing should be hidden. We're not enemies. Finally, that the line of communications is always open between the administration, the trustees, and the adjuncts. This can include making tapes of the bargaining sessions available to trustees so they can see for themselves what's going on at the table. Written reports generated to trustees, joint progress reports given to trustees. The implementation of a more collegial bargaining structure doesn't guarantee that we won't have differences. It just means that our differences will be understood and that we'll have a much better chance of coming to a resolution in the best interest of students and our community. In other words, that we'll be working together for the good of all. In this spirit, we are happy to be moving forward together after today toward completing this first bargaining agreement and to preparing for the next stage in our journey together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Mark Levitt, who will give his presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Williams, and all the guests here who've chosen to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity to represent the administration and present our position on this very important matter. First, we agree with a lot of the opening remarks by Rick and Terry. This is not an issue whether we value adjuncts, how important they are to the college. We know that. And, you know, we've reached an agreement on 95% of this. And the bargaining was very collegial. We appreciate that. We work well. I've known Rick for many, many years. He's known me. We bargain at other places. We have bargained at other places. We have other SEIU matters with him and his colleagues at the union. So the relationship is good and it's strong, and we appreciate that, and that's important. And we agree that this is the first agreement. It's sometimes tough to get that under your belt. You're setting the parameters for the future. Sometimes, as you said, you agree to disagree, but for the most part, we agree. And the relationship is good. And we feel there has been transparency. We've been very open in bargaining with the union, and we've been very open with this board. You have given us direction as the law requires. We have had executive sessions where you've given us direction, and we have attempted to follow that direction at the bargaining table. And you know, and we presented to you all sides of the picture. We didn't want any surprises here today. We were very clear as to what the union was asking for, why they wanted what they did, the pros and cons of our position, their position, and you all provided direction, which is what we try to do here. So I will say, I think going forward, this is the first agreement. As they said, in less than a year, this is for 1 year, so we'll be back at the table. And a lot of the ideas and suggestions that they are making to you today are not for you to declare today. They're good concepts. And that's what the next bargaining is about. We'll go back to the table in good faith. We'll continue to work with the union, and we'll work together to to improve the contract, whether it be economically or non-economically. We'll see what's in the contract that's working, what's not working. That's the whole purpose of a first contract. So, as I said, this is an important step, and once you resolve these two issues, it's then up to the union to ratify the agreement that you've declared appropriate, and then we'll come back to you for a final ratification again after the union ratifies it. So we're moving ahead, and this is a good time. Unfortunately, as he said, there were two issues we just couldn't agree to. One of which is the $150 cancellation fee. You knew all about it. In fact, when you failed to ratify the first time, I believe that was one of the concerns of the board of whether or not that should be paid. So you understand people are assigned classes, and the proposal was if it's canceled within 2 weeks, they would get that. And I can say that full-time faculty also teach overloads or supplements, and they are not paid for that. Now, they're paid for their full-time work, and their regular load includes preparation and teaching and other community service and lots of other things that don't apply to an adjunct. But many of them, if not all of them, teach overload courses, which could be a course, if they didn't teach, might go to an adjunct. And if they are assigned an overload course that doesn't have enough students, and it gets canceled for some reason, they do not get any extra compensation. They don't get $150. And that's the point we made to special master and magistrate and to the union, that, you know, the adjunct faculty, the part-timers, are being treated the same as full-time in that regard. And it also, you know, we don't control if a class doesn't, you know, gets canceled for some reason. So it's not something we can control. What this could do is force us to not assign classes. One of the problems, if we're facing a penalty, if you will, for assigning it, you know, we'll just wait to see, you know, if the class makes, or, you know, us hire people at the last minute. That's not in anybody's interest. We want to give them notice, and we want to have notice so that, you know, for both sakes. We pointed out, Dr. Leotroth pointed out that many of your courses have common syllabuses. You have very common instruction. So they don't have to spend time, you know, creating that. It's given to them. I'm not saying there's not some work, but they are professionals, they are professors, they are teachers, and they know their field. So when it comes to teaching math or history, they're not learning history or learning math, they're imparting it to students. So, you know, that's one reason they get hired as adjuncts. So we determined that the $150 was not something that was appropriate in this circumstance, and we're asking you to accept the president's recommendation not to pay the $150 and to reject the special magistrate's recommendation. The second thing is the request for a bonus. You need to be very careful here, because they've asked for people who taught back in 2020 and 2021, the fall and spring, to get a bonus for past service. It's not a lump sum for future service or for current service. Some of those teachers, that budget year is over. There is not that money. If people taught both semesters, they'd get $1,000. I forget the exact number. I want to say 600 adjuncts, thereabouts, or more. You're talking about a $600,000, if that's the number, whatever the number is. And they claimed, and the magistrate misconstrued the evidence, they thought we could use the CARES Act, the HERF money. But it's our position that that money cannot be used to pay a bonus for past service. So although the magistrate recommended it, we believe he misapprehended or misunderstood the law. Basically what he said is, I don't know if he misunderstood it, he said, well, you could use that money for something else and free up other money. But that money, you all as the board made the decision how to spend the money. You decided to have smaller classes, have more classes. We hired more adjuncts with that money because we were able to justify that. So they were the benefit of CARES Act and HERF money. No one else in the college got that money. If you gave an adjunct who may not even be teaching with us today, right? They taught a year and a half ago, and you're going to send them $1,000, and they may not even be a teacher with you today. They're asking you to pay back for past service. I'm not even sure that's legal to pay under the statute for past service like that. But no other college employee, no other faculty, full-time staff, or anyone else received a lump sum bonus payment for what they did during COVID. And that's what they're asking you to give them. So not just is it a prior budget year, it would have significant value or cost to the college. And more importantly, you would be treating them better than any other staff member or faculty member here at the college. And the president and the administration does not believe that's appropriate, does not believe that should be done. Now, also, they are paid similar to, what they get paid for the adjunct, teaching an adjunct course, is the same a faculty member gets paid to teach overload or supplemental courses. They are paid the same hourly rate, credit rate, and the full-time did not receive an increase in that rate. So the 3% went to full-timers, that's true, but that's a different animal and confuses the issue. So we are asking you to accept the president's recommendation not to pay the lump sum bonus payment for past service and reject the special magistrate's ruling. I want to close with sort of where I started. This is a beginning. We will presumably have a contract after this. What happens once you declare and make your decisions today, we then put it into a collective bargaining agreement. As I said, they vote on it. It will come back to you to vote on. And the relationship, I think, is strong. And many of these things they talked about, transparency, let's have reports, let's have video of the meeting stuff. Those are things we'll discuss. If they want to bring it up at the table, that's subject to bargaining, but that's not something you need to declare today. So the only decisions you need to make today, and the motions we're asking you to make and pass, are to reject the special magistrate's recommendation and accept the administration's position as to both issues, the 150 and the not paying the lump sum bonus. And it's that simple. After discussion, after your deliberation, it only takes that motion to reject both recommendations and accept the administration's recommendation. That would be the motion that we're asking you to make, and that's what needs to be done. So with that, if you have questions later, as the chair directed you, be glad to answer them. But the relationship's strong. Let's move forward. Let's get this done, and we'll go into bargaining next year and keep working together for the better, for the interests of the students, which is prime interest, right? And the community you serve, and our faculty, and our staff, all our employees. You have a very global view. All they care about are adjuncts. They don't care what we do with full-time faculty. They don't care how it might affect other things, but you have a duty as legislative body to consider all factors. And we're asking you to do that as I suggested in the motion. So thank you for your time and consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We will now move on to see if any trustees have any questions for either parties. As Trustee Gibbons. Yeah.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment and chair. I was going to ask the same thing as Trustee Gibbons. Probably it would be appropriate after there's a motion on the table for us to provide comments if we don't have questions now. Is that appropriate? Okay.
Okay. Trustee Gibbons?
Yes, sir.
Same request?
I make the motion so that I can make a comment for anybody else. If they don't have any questions, I'll make a motion that we accept the administration's recommendations related to this negotiation.
Hold on, Trustee Gibbons. We do have a public comment card.
Okay.
So we'll put that on hold. Is that good? And we can move on. The meeting is now open for public comments. Sorry. The meeting is now open for public comments. Members of the public that wish to speak should have provided Rebecca with a blue public comment card. We do have a public comment card. I would like to call Javon Franks up. You will have 3 minutes, and the timer is on the screen.
Thank you. Again, my name is Javon Franks. I'm an organizer with SEIU, FPSU, and the very first thing I got to do when I joined this organization was to work on the certification with the adjuncts who organized here at this institution. And in that time, I have had the sincere pleasure of getting to know educators with whom I have a deep personal respect for. You have partners here. The adjunct faculty are not just folks who are coming and going semester to semester, but in many cases, they are here for decades and are deep and as committed to the success of this institution as each and every other person who calls themselves a part of the SPC family. Their qualifications are immense. In some cases, they exceed even the qualifications of your full-time faculty. Terry, who spoke just a little while ago, is an expert in her field with contract negotiations, project management, has worked in the public and private sector, and she's indicative of the kind of expertise that adjunct faculty bring into the classroom. The thing that impressed me most is that I've spoken to so many folks, and the themes are very similar. They say, I know what the job pays, but I'm here because I'm a professional. This is what I have trained to do, and my students in the community need me. They are here because they are needed to bring the information, the knowledge, the expertise that they have to another generation of folks who wish to go into fields from being a first responder or an educator or a doctor or a lawyer. It's all walks of life that they are serving. I showed up to my classroom with a broken back because I don't have time off, so I went and taught my class before I went to the hospital. I have a hole in my roof, and I need to get it fixed, so I hope I get classes this semester so that I can afford to fix that hole in my roof. Never have I heard anybody say they don't care, or they want as much money as they can get, or they don't like the institution. What I hear consistently over and over again is I am here for the students. I'm a professional, and I think anybody who has committed themselves to going to school to get an advanced degree, a master's, a PhD, would expect that they're going to be respected as a professional and paid like a professional. The $150 class cancellation fee is an element that exists in every contract that we have at every other college and university across the state, including at institutions where we also work with Mark Levitt at. There are differences between full-time and part-time, and that is in contracts all across the country in every field. We recognize that there are differences between full-time and part-time. So the fact that some people get treated differently does not mean they're getting treated better, but a small change, even something like, I'm just gonna finish my sentence, a small change, even something like we have a new book. So that means a professor has to go through their entire curriculum for an entire semester and change their reference materials. So the idea that there's no prep or minimal prep, even something like, page 2, can mean hours of work. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Trustee Gibbons, I think you were going to make a motion, and then we can have deliberation, or questions or comments, discussion.
The motion, the same motion I made before was that we accept the administration's position on this particular issue, which is to not pay the $1,000 or the $150 fee for class cancellations.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second and ask our general counsel, do we need to specifically include in the motion that we're rejecting the special master's recommendation? I mean, he said it, but.
Yeah, I think what he said is fine.
Okay.
If you want to clarify, you can go on.
That's fine. I'll second.
Okay, do we have any comments? I think Trustee Gibbons, you said you had comments.
I'll yield to the lady, Ms. Cole. She has some comments. I'll go after her.
Okay. Trustee Cole.
No, I wanted to reiterate what Mr. Levitt said about cooperation and valuing, because I don't think that any of these negotiations, and also Mr. Smith said the same thing, these aren't adversarial. These are just getting the college to a financially stable and operational path that we all agree on. And I think these two issues are two things that this board has been uncomfortable with. One, as Mr. Levitt said, just the retroactive and the legality and the discussion surrounding just straight bonus. And the cancellation fee, I think, is something that we've struggled with but have never felt comfortable with. And so with that, I'll support the administration's recommendation and look forward to getting this behind us and moving forward in the future. So,
Very good. Trustee Gibbons.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the last young man, what was his name, Javon? I wanted to
Yeah, Javon. Yes, that
Was
was.
it Javon?
Yeah.
There was?
Yes.
I appreciated his comment because, my mother was an educator before she retired. My grandfather was an educator, and he was one of the first African American principals in the county of Pinellas. And I guess why I'm saying that is each of them signed a contract. And in that contract, when they signed it, they knew what their job responsibilities were. They knew what they were getting from them everywhere it go. And so I don't want to make this an adversarial thing. I agree with Rick Smith and his comments of, it's about relationships. I will also say that I'm very supportive of the union that the sanitation workers have in St. Petersburg. So people try to take me as a person who I don't support unions. I've always supported what Mr. Joe Savage, Ben Shirley, and some other folks who were mistreated for years. In fact, they lost their jobs striking in the 60s to make sure that the sanitation workers were treated fairly. And I will always support the sanitation workers and the union that they have, because that was the way that they were treated fairly on their jobs. I say that to say this, to get to this point. The point is that the adjunct professors in St. Petersburg College are not mistreated. In fact, they make a good wage, one of the highest wages for adjuncts in the state. And it is very hard and difficult for me to make a decision different than the one that we are recommending, because when a person signs a contract, it's just like when you have a credit card. They ask you to pay it by a certain date, or there's a penalty. Right? There's a penalty for doing that. Your credit goes down, all kinds of things happen. And if you sign a contract, that's your word. That is your bond. That you will live by that particular contract. And Mr. Smith, you're right. It is based upon relationships. But let me just say this. If a relationship needed to be built, there was nobody on this board that's on this board now, besides Katie Cole, that Dr. Williams can tell you all the way back to when the entire time that Dr. Law was president. I asked if there is a problem with the adjunct faculty or even the full-time faculty. I asked on video, you can go back and look, at least 5 to 7 times. Please come see me or any other board member. Or I'll set a meeting with me and the president and we can sit down and talk about it and work through this. We didn't need to have a union to do that because prior to the union coming, I was trying to build a relationship. But they refused. Nobody came to see me. I got no phone calls. I got nothing. So if there was a relationship being built or that could have been built, we could have done that. But nobody, at least until this union came, wanted to talk about this. And they put it in a situation where we couldn't talk about it as a college with the folks that work for us. They put it in a situation where we had to deal with the union. And like I said, I am not against unions. I just believe the union should be used to better the lives of people who are mistreated or who are not getting something that is fair to them. And in this situation, I don't see that. And then, Ms. Carey, thank you again for your comments. You are also right. But honesty is needed when you talk about fairness and other things. The magistrate rules, but you should also put in your comments that that's non-binding. And that the final say-so in this particular process lies with this board. You know, the magistrate did make a decision, but I don't believe that he considered all facts. And maybe if he did, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we have a fiduciary responsibility as a board to do what's accurate and right. And what's accurate is that each one of the folks that are adjuncts knew from the beginning exactly what they were getting themselves into. That this was a part-time position. It did not come along with incentives and added pay and other things. So I, Mr. Chair, am asking that we move forward with the administration's position. I don't want this to be adversarial. I just want people to understand that our adjuncts are paid almost at the highest level in the state of Florida, higher than most of the schools in Florida. And at what point do we say enough is enough and we have to move forward? We value you. Yes, that's why we pay you more than what other schools get. But we cannot continue to make changes when people knew the situation when they came into that particular job. It would be like me taking a job at Walmart as a greeter, but then I wanted to be the store manager. I can't just arbitrarily change jobs without doing something different. Or if I accepted that contract, then I need to apply for that job. Not make the job what I want it to be. I have to apply for a different job. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Very good. Do we have anything else? Trustee Butts? Good. The dialogue will remain open and, I guess so we need to put the motion to a vote. Trustee Gibbons, seconded by Trustee Cole. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned.